So now we want to look at the role of trade in between different countries and investment in between different countries. We also want to look at the activities and consequences of multinational corporations, as well as how they can make foreign direct investments in different countries. And we're also going to look at the effects of foreign direct investments in different countries as well. So let's get started. So the first thing we want to look at is why we trade, right? Now, let's get the easy stuff over with first. Trade has supply side benefits. And so there's economies of scale if we have a larger export market. So think about a company like Toyota, which exports its cars to the rest of the world. If they are able to do that, then they can ramp up production and they will gain economies of scale. Number two, there's increased competition from abroad, and that incentivizes innovation. People in Japan can buy European cars, they can buy American cars. Then Toyota has to step up their game if they want to maintain market share. Trade also transfers skills and technology and production methods from high to low income countries. So think about something like Tesla building a Tesla factory in China. That will transfer skills to the Chinese population. That will transfer technology and production methods to the Chinese population. And then number four, specialization and trade increases incomes, savings, and likely investment. And this is actually what happened in 1978 when China went through its economic reform. Is it allowed different countries to put their money into China. And that actually worked out. And we've seen the miraculous growth of China in the last 30, 40 years. Trade also stimulates demand and employment, and that increases the spending power of people and the welfare of people. But high income countries end up having more power in trade negotiations. And so low income countries end up being only able to focus on exporting primary products. There are three reasons why primary product prices disadvantage low income countries. And so if you're in low income country, chances are you're agriculturally based or commodities based. And if you're a country in that situation, then you're at a disadvantage in trade negotiations, because while specialization and comparative advantage make you more efficient, primary product exporting economies are disadvantaged because primary products are income inelastic. And so because there's low responsiveness to income changes, rising global incomes haven't really increased demand for agricultural goods. And so there's a shift towards more demand for manufactured items and services instead of those agricultural goods. And so if you're a economy that produces mainly agricultural goods, you're not going to be able to partake in the benefits of improved global prosperity. Number two, imported manufactured goods are priced at a much higher price. High income countries' manufacturers, they can set higher prices because the goods they produce have higher value. And also, they have some control over the market prices for their goods. So for example, Toyota has pricing power over Toyota cars because they are unique to Toyota. However, if you are a rice farmer in Vietnam versus a rice farmer in Thailand, your pricing power is very, very limited. And also, suppliers are disjointed. There isn't one rice farmer in Vietnam that produces all the rice, just like how there isn't one coffee farmer that produces all the coffee in Colombia. However, there's only one Toyota brand. There's also the impact of subsidies. And so US and European farm subsidies lower global agricultural prices. So for example, US cotton subsidies also decrease world prices, giving US farmers a pricing edge. And sometimes farmers from foreign developing countries complain because they're like, because you give your farmers subsidies, we have to price our products lower in order to remain competitive. So here's how low to middle income countries have responded, because no country wants to stay a primary product focused country. So countries can reduce economic risk from trade by, number one, diversifying their import basket and economy. And so we can reduce reliance on a single country's goods and services, and we can reduce reliance on a single product or industry dominating our economy. Number two, we can promote domestic secondary and tertiary sector development with protectionist policies, for example, but we might end up having retaliation from other countries. Number three, we might be a more diversified export-led economy. So for example, China is quite a diversified export-led economy. Its economy isn't just dependent on one export. Number four, we could develop comparative advantages in areas formerly dominated by high-income countries. So high-income countries can also have a diversified export economy, right? Or a diversified economy in general. If one developing country is able to focus all of their resources in one specific industry and get a comparative advantage in that, that will have a lot of benefits because it will give the country a competitive moat that would be hard to breach. And so Chinese economic reform in 1978 accomplished actually all four of this. So if you think about China as a country, they have a diversified economy, they have a diversified import basket, they have successfully promoted secondary and tertiary sectors, they do have some kind of protectionist policies around their infant industries and around the raw materials that are needed to make things like computer chips. And they've got a very diversified export-led economy full of different goods and services. And they've also got comparative advantages in different kinds of areas. So, for example, the Chinese electric car market has been growing rapidly in the last 10 years. And so with that in mind, let's shift gears and look at the role of investment between different countries. So investment flows between countries in search of profits, interests, and dividends. The current account deficit incentivizes governments to allow a financial account surplus. Emerging economies making quick progress towards becoming high-income economies, often present high-risk, high-return opportunities due to the country's high growth rates. And so an example of this would be BRICS, right? So like Brazil, Russia, India, China, so on and so forth. Multinational corporations, they operate in multiple countries. They're responsible for much of the investment. So just think about the brands that you know that don't belong to your own country. So for example, Apple, Huawei, Samsung, Toyota, all of these are examples of multinational companies or corporations. And so there are really three benefits of multinational corporations that make investments and so forth with what they do. Well, first thing is they do foreign direct investments. So that is setting up production units or just outright buying existing production units in other countries. An example would be Costco, which is an American company expanding in China. Or Maple Leaf Foods, which is a Canadian meat processing company, being acquired by Shuanghui, which is a Chinese meat processing company. So with foreign direct investment, MNCs can bring new technology, ideas, and add to GDP and exports, which may generate employment. So for example, Tesla making a foreign direct investment in China by building a factory there not only allows new technology and ideas to enter China, but it also helped employ a bunch of people that are now working at the Tesla factory. Number two, foreign direct investment from MNC can stimulate economic growth in a particular industry, in a particular area. And again, with the Tesla example, it stimulated economic growth within the electric vehicles market because it forced electric vehicle makers to become more innovative in the products that they made. And then number three, FDI can help low and middle income countries with capital accumulations. Like if Tesla builds a factory in China, even if one day Tesla decides to close the factory, they're probably not going to raise it to the ground. They're probably going to sell the factory to another electric vehicles company. And that's good because an increase in capital implies a future improvement in the productivity of the country. But with everything, there's two sides to it. So let's look at the 5 negative consequences of multinational corporations and foreign direct investment. Some MSCs are just not liked by the domestic population. So MNCs can replace domestic firms, they can deplete non-renewable resources, and cause pollution. So for example, Walmart loves to go into a location and undercut and displace local supermarkets because Walmart has a lot of pricing power. They're a big company and suppliers typically have to listen to Walmart's pricing decisions because Walmart is maybe going to make up like 80% of their business. And in terms of depleting non-renewable resources, that would be like a foreign company getting licensed to cut down trees in South America. And then once they've cut down all the rainforests, they're gone. They leave, right? And that's a problem. And while they're doing that, they're going to cause pollution there as well. So that's a problem. So locals might not like multinational corporations, and for good reason. Number two, profits are returned to home countries, and a lot of the time foreigners are employed for labor, especially in top positions. So top labor are usually foreigners. So for example, in Hong Kong, top Manulife financial executives, and Manulife is a Canadian insurance company, they're all Canadians. And it's the case for Manulife branches around the world. Some of the top people are always going to be Canadian. And so if you think about a company like Apple, the top executives are probably going to be American. And they just might be operating in the Chinese branch of Apple, for example. Number three, MNCs can pressure governments into making policies that benefit them. And so Walmart for years have tried to lobby the Indian government to ease foreign direct investment laws. Yeah. And so Walmart wants to do that because they want more money in India because they know they can generate higher returns in India. And so if that's the case, then Walmart has the money and resources and legal team to just go ahead and talk to top government officials in India and try to get them to support Walmart's plans. MNCs also have economic power to negotiate tax breaks and exemptions from environmental laws. And so, for example, Amazon a few years back was trying to decide where to open their second headquarters. And different cities started offering all of these tax breaks to Amazon for if Amazon built their second headquarters in their city. Whichever city Amazon builds a second headquarters in, it's going to experience a growth in employment, a growth in human capital. But should that growth warrant cities and government officials to give more power to Amazon? That's a very debatable question. And then finally, number five, MNCs can act as a monopsony and drive down factor prices. So for example, Foxconn setting up a factory in a rural Chinese town and underpaying Chinese workers and giving them harsh working conditions. So that's an example of how MNCs can act as monopsonies. So if you don't work for Foxconn, you don't really have any other options. And so they have a lot of power in those kinds of situations.